Welcome to Literary and Jury Charge Practice. Let's start out with some literary material, and these are some questions asked of, I don't know if she's a student or if she's actually a court reporter, but her name is Heather Piper from Hinckley, Ohio, and she was interviewed for this article in one of the JCR magazines called A Good Start. Ready? Here we go. Do you have plans set for once you have graduated? When I started the program, I was initially interested in pursuing a career in captioning. Once I went on a couple of job shadows, however, I found that I was really taken with official reporting. The more I have learned about the challenges and rewards that come with officialships, the more interested I became in pursuing that instead. I hope to find a position at a court reporting firm in the Columbus area in order to get a couple of years of experience doing deposition work before seeking out an official position. One of the things I love most about court reporting is that I may decide to take one career path, but if I decide that path is not for me, there are still a slew of other options available to me. How soon do you plan to test for your RPR certification? I took the written knowledge test on May 16 and plan to complete the skills test by the end of this summer. Being in an online program can feel isolating at times, and I would like to encourage other online students to get as involved in real-world activities as much as and as soon as possible. Joining the Ohio Court Reporters Association and being able to talk to and interact with real reporters has been more rewarding and motivating than I could have imagined. If you have the chance to meet your fellow students or instructors in person, absolutely do it. Last month, my classmate Cassandra Hall and I participated in a series of mock depositions in collaboration with the Ohio State University's Moritz College of Law. I participated in this event last year as well, and it has been one of the very best experiences in terms of preparing me for what the working environment is really like. We did everything a working reporter does, from swearing in witnesses to taking down the deposition to editing and delivering a final transcript of the proceedings. The whole process was hugely beneficial in honing my reporting skills. Right. Now let's try a little jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. Witnesses were allowed to testify as experts and to give opinions. You must consider the opinions but are not required to accept them as true or correct. The meaning and importance of any decision is for you to decide. In evaluating the believability of an expert witness, follow the instructions about the believability of witnesses generally. In addition, consider the expert's knowledge, skill, experience, training, and education, the reasons the expert gave for any opinion, and the facts or information on which the expert relied on reaching that opinion. You must decide on whether the information on which the expert relied was true and accurate. You may disregard any opinion that you find unbelievable, unreasonable, or unsupported by the evidence. An expert witness may be asked a hypothetical. A hypothetical asks the witness to assume certain facts are true and to give an opinion based on the assumed fact. It is up to you to decide whether an assumed fact has been proved. If you conclude that an assumed fact is not true, consider the effect of the expert's reliance on that fact in evaluating the expert's opinion. Witnesses who were not testifying as experts gave their opinions during the trial. You may, but are not required to accept those opinions as true or correct. You may give the opinions whatever weight you think appropriate. Consider the extent of the witness's opportunity to perceive the matters on which his or her opinion is based, the reasons the witness gave for any opinion, and the facts or information on which the witness relied in forming that opinion. You must decide whether information on which the witness relied was true or accurate. You may disregard all or any part of an opinion that you find unbelievable, unreasonable, or unsupported by the evidence. A defendant has an absolute right not to testify. He or she may rely on the state of the evidence and argue that the people have failed to prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Do not consider, for any reason at all, the fact that the defendant did not testify. Do not discuss that fact during your deliberations or let it influence your decision in any way. You've heard evidence. The defendant made written or oral statements before the trial. You must decide whether the defendant made any of these statements in whole or in part. If you decide that the defendant made such statements, consider the statements along with all the other evidence in reaching your verdict. It's up to you to decide how much importance to give to the statements. Consider with caution any statement made by the defendant tending to show his guilt, unless the statement was written or otherwise recorded. The defendant may not be convicted of any crime based on his out-of-court statements alone. You may rely on the defendant's out-of-court statements to convict him only if you first conclude that the other evidence shows that the charged crime was committed. Right, now for some literary practice, and this is called Skilled for Success. Ready? Here we go. There are many court reporters who partake in activities outside of the courtroom. Sure, some of these activities may have started out as a hobby to unwind after a long day at the office. But as time passed, the skills gained from these activities have become a great benefit. In many cases, these skills have kept reporters focused or even helped to improve dexterity and posture. From sign language and yoga to knitting and ballroom dancing, these skills have made a difference in and out of the courtroom. Knitting for dexterity and concentration. Freelance court reporter Susan Heyerman, RDR, CRR, from Shelby Township, Michigan, has been knitting since she was a teenager, but last August she started knitting lace shawls. As Heyerman describes it, the complex lace pattern shawls are extremely challenging and require a lot of concentration. She has to be on her toes for the twists and turns that can come when working on a pattern. I think I'm a better reporter and knitter because of my ability to concentrate. The two go hand in hand, she says. She adds that having it handy allows her to knit just about every day. I often keep smaller projects in my car to work on while I'm waiting to go in for my deposition. The dexterity of knitting also keeps her fingers nimble, an advantage to her as a court reporter. Hireman adds that it also helps keep both her profession and her knitting skills in perspective. Like reporting, knitting can be frustrating. It's like those days when you have a witness who wants to talk 350 words per minute. You just have to hang in there. You know you will be a better reporter and knitter because you have persevered. All right, now let's practice some material from this closing argument. Ready? Here we go. If you think it's it and you've got a guy that's an expert, show it to him. He can say if it's or not, if it is or not. I mean, he was actually here in the courthouse. They had those tire prints in 2012. They had those footprints in 2012, and they never showed it to him. They didn't ever match them. What did Gibraltar say? We just decided they were similar. I think I have his exact words. We took a look at them and felt they were consistent with the responding fire department. But see, that's a long way from saying they were from the fire department. They were just saying maybe whoever made those tracks goes to the same shoe store as one of the firemen or another. But that's not the same as saying they are the same. You know, when you walk around, even with some new shoes, you get something stuck in between. You get a rock in there. You get, out here we get those darn stickers all the time, and you stick those in there and you get stuck. Sometimes you walk on something that tears a little piece of your tread here and there, and it becomes like a fingerprint. It's special to you, and you can look at those photos all you want, and you'll see that, yeah, they are kind of the same kind of boots, but no one has testified that they are the same, that they are the same boot, just that they are the same kind. And the fireman said I didn't make them, and none of my buddies went over there either. So what do we have here? We have a motive, a rather cheap motive, $25,000, but that's the motive and that's it. That's really the only hard evidence in this case. She was unhappy. She wanted to move. According to the coroner, she could have been killed when my client was down the hill. I think that there is a reasonable way to look at this evidence that doesn't violate so many of the end results that the government wishes we would get to. I think that the evidence shows that she went to church. Apparently, my client wasn't there. No cars were there. You saw this place is wide open. It's not like there's big security screens around it or fences. Somebody sees that nobody is there. The cars aren't there. Maybe somebody knows she goes to church at a certain time. Comes over, bursts the door open. Oh, by the way, what DNA was on the pry bar? Remind me? Oh, they didn't look, did they? Whose fingerprints were on the desk that was moved? Whose fingerprints were on the drawers that were opened? Whose fingerprints were on the stuff that was on the floor? That shiny metal case that had the poker chips in it, it's perfect to record fingerprints. What about the camera? Nice flat surface. We don't know. They didn't fingerprint it. They didn't do DNA. In fact, the only thing that they did DNA testing on was what? My client's gun. His gun that he's had in his house for years. He keeps it right there at the head of his bed. He probably kicks it every time he makes the bed or sweeps the floor or vacuums or whatever. Of course, it has his DNA on it. It's probably had his DNA on it for years. Who else's DNA was on it? Somebody's. The DNA expert said there were 2 DNAs on those gun, a major and minor contributor. My client was the major. It was his gun. Who was the minor? Don't know. Now Ms. Richardson says that I fired that gun. All we have to do is take a sample of her blood. We can rule her out or rule her in. Circumstantial evidence is pointing to not guilty. So, you've got a burglar in there. The burglar has busted the door, which was broken. There's this pry bar that goes unexamined to this day. He placed a loot bag on the floor. The cops are familiar with loot bags. He puts a bunch of stuff on it. Then he hears a car drive up and he looks out the window. I don't know what she saw when that happens. Maybe she saw him. Maybe she just saw that the door was open, but she didn't park her car by the house. Did you notice that she parked it kind of over out of the way? She pulls out her cell phone, but then she sees the guys coming toward her, the guy who grabbed the gun that he put in the loot bag, and he goes walking out the door, and he's walking towards where she is. And so she runs into the chicken coop because she thinks, well, maybe he didn't see me or hasn't seen me, or maybe he comes out and just looks around and sees that it's pretty open here and tells her to go in the chicken coop, and then he shoots her. Doesn't want that gun anymore, so he throws it. We'll get back to some literary practice. Back to the article called Skilled for Success. And this is called Quilting Pushes New Technology. Here we go. Hireman isn't the only reporter who has affinity for fabric. Helga Lavin, RPR from Hicksville, New York, has been a court reporter for 20 years and a quilter for almost as long. A neighbor introduced her to quilting, and Lavin has been at it ever since. Sewing helps me become a better court reporter by keeping my mind sharp. With quilting, one is always wondering how to piece a project together, as well as trying to keep on top of the latest gadgets and gizmos in the sewing market. When she compares her growth within the field of sewing to her career as a court reporter, she relates it's important to embrace the changes in technology. It is in this way I can produce a beautiful quilt and an accurate transcript with ease. As I sit before my sewing machine, I am immediately transformed. Lavin says her mind lingers and often thinks about a job that may have caused some anxiety or a situation that arose on a job that frazzled her. She uses the time while quilting to think how she can address those situations the next time she is faced with them. With each project I tackle, either producing a transcript or a proceeding that included a fast-talking, mumbling witness or creating a new quilt with challenging piecing, I learned to be patient and forgiving. If something doesn't work well next time, I will remember to do it differently. All right, that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.